Thanks so much for joining us. Hopefully the room fills up a little bit. We do have some open seats up front if anyone feels bold later on. Before we get in and even cover introductions, I just want to cover why we're even talking about this. We're talking about how brands can adapt to economic cycles. And the reason that we're talking about that is because every single week between the teams that we represent, our teams talk to thousands of sellers, thousands of partner agencies every single week. And in true Amazon fashion, we cut that data, we slice that data, we analyze it, maybe we write a document about it. And what we've really found, not surprisingly, is that this year, brands are super interested in how they can effectively adapt during the natural ebb and flow of economic cycles. There's uncertainty around that. There's obviously challenges that come with that. But we've also found great pockets of success, and that's primarily where we're going to zoom in today with some real examples, real tactics. It's not a one-size-fits-all per se, but we do have some really great proof points around this, and then we're going to have a couple asks here to the end. They're not big asks, so that then we can help out, for the sellers in the audience today in sort of navigating the future of economic uncertainty. So just by way of introduction, I'm Tim Aker. I'm the Director of Sales for the Global Growth Sales team. And simply put, we work with SMBs and sellers and partner agencies to help grow business. This is in the US and in Canada. And we kind of view ourselves as experts in ads and sponsored ads, display video and audio, DSP, and then some other upper funnel tactics as well. And I'm pleased to pass the mic to Dory.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Dory Wendling, and I lead the marketing team at Global Overview, or GO for short. You might hear me call it GO. But at Global Overview, we manage full funnel advertising as part of a holistic approach that also includes retail, creative, and operations optimizations. So we can really use every consumer lever that we have to help drive our brands' businesses on Amazon.
Thank you, Dory. And I'm Raghavendra Mani. I'm an insights consultant with Amazon Ads, and in my role, I work with small and medium businesses and partners like Global Overview to identify trends and patterns that can help them be successful on Amazon. We do that through multiple solutions. You may have heard some of them, like Amazon Marketing Cloud, for example. I will be actually walking you through some of the research that we found interesting for small and medium businesses, looking into a very recent past. Over to you, Tim.
Great. So we're going to get going here. Agenda-wise, cover some of what we're hearing from brands. We'll go into some proof points, some research. We've gone really deep here to understand what brands are doing to succeed throughout times of economic cycles. Get into some of the nitty-gritty on executing the right strategy. Again, not a one-size-fits-all, but some best practices, highlighting a lot of what our partner agencies like Global Overview is doing. And then end with some key takeaways and a couple, like as mentioned, easy asks. All right, next slide, please. All right, getting off with how brands thrive. First off, to even begin to have this discussion, we have to start with where we're at today. And that really starts with the customer, and it starts with the shopper here. So right now, shopper confidence about their own personal income, which is very much tied to the broader economy, is at a 12-year low. And that's not very surprising. I'm sure we can empathize with that a bit. It's not very surprising to think that that's going to impact how shoppers are making decisions. And further research shows that 60% of shoppers are actually switching brands to seek out better value. Right? So it's impacting shopper behavior. We know that. It's important for brands to be able to adapt to that. And brands really are paying attention. So a whopping, next slide, please. A whopping 80% of brands that we're working with are citing the broader economy, whether that be price changes, supply chain issues, the broader business environment as driving their day-to-day decisions. I've heard a ton about it just in the last day and a half in meeting with a lot of sellers here today and agencies. And just by show of hands, actually I'll flip this on its head. Has anyone not adjusted their advertising or Amazon selling strategy this year as a result of economic ebbs and flows? Yeah, pretty consistent. And just to get some audience engagement here, has anyone adjusted any of their advertising strategies this year in response to economic cycles? Yep, it's something we hear day in and day out from the customers that we work with. And Dory, I'm just curious from your perspective at Global Overview if you're hearing more of the same.
Yeah, absolutely. Brands that we work with are acutely tuned into the shifting economic cycles, but the impact looks different for every business. You know, the impulse in times of uncertainty can be to pull back, to either pause advertising altogether or focus solely on lower funnel tactics in the name of efficiency. But at Global Overview, our role is to partner with each brand that we work with to clarify their priorities and make sure that we're reconfirming a strategy that works to protect both their near-term efficiency and their long-term growth. And what we see consistently is that when brands greatly slow or stop the flow of incremental traffic from advertising, it really becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. You know, when you have fewer shoppers coming to your product detail page, your sales velocity declines, and your Amazon orders will follow suit. Meanwhile, the competition for site traffic will intensify, and that could raise the cost of sponsored ads for everyone. But by contrast, brands that maintain upper funnel investment can really come out ahead. For example, we looked at Global Overview clients who invested consistently in upper funnel DSP tactics during the economic cycle of 2022. And what we saw was that they were able to drive an ad attributed new to brand acquisition cost that was 26% lower than brands who were only focused on lower funnel. So treating upper funnel as optional during times of uncertainty may feel safe, but maintaining it is what can actually fuel growth.
Yep, and as Dory mentioned, growth isn't gone because buying hasn't shopped, but it has changed and it requires a smarter way of working. We have some data points here, but I don't want to miss the through line that it really is the devil in the details here. When we did an analysis of brands from the last economic cycle, what we found is that those brands that sustained advertising spend, they did shift their strategy as part of that, but when they sustained advertising spend, actually saw improved ROI. And when you think about sustaining advertising spend, no matter the economic cycles, you might think that that's a long-term strategy, but we have research here that suggests that you can actually observe some real-time efficiency gains, and it can be used as a competitive advantage if done so in the right way. And to that point, those brands that are bold and diversify ad strategy, oftentimes mirroring some of the changes in shopper patterns as a result of economic ebbs and flows, even saw improvements on efficiency. And this is a pretty remarkable improvement in efficiency on top of an already highly performant ad platform of 35%. And we'll go through some of the details here around how brands adapt. But again, Dory, do you have any examples of how you've helped brands adapt in similar diversification type strategies?
Yes, absolutely. So for SMBs, the instinct can often be to stay with search because it's closer to the point of purchase. But if growth is your goal, relying only on lower funnel tactics can actually be less efficient over time because it ignores how the shopper moves through the purchase journey from awareness to consideration to purchase. So here's how we look at a media mix and how it can be really impactful. So upper funnel awareness and consideration tactics, they work to warm up the right audiences. And so when those audiences eventually come into Amazon and search, we can convert them at much higher rates. So instead of paying steep CPCs to compete for cold traffic in a competitive auction, we are building trust and recognition with consumers earlier while also making every search dollar that we have go further. And then we can take it further and layer in multi-touch attribution and AMC insights that tell us which combinations of ad tactics are driving the most efficient conversions. And that's where we can really double down on what's working the hardest. So a diversified media mix, it's not about spending more, it's about spending smarter. So we're fueling that growth today while making sure that our lower funnel ads are going to work harder for us tomorrow.
All right. Thank you, Tim, for setting the context and Dory for sharing what Global Overview has seen with their full funnel advertisers. Now, I'm going to walk you all through some of what we have seen in Amazon ads. And of course, we start with looking at recent historical data because history offers a blueprint. What we did was in 2021-22, we found there were a lot of inflationary and economic cycles that we could learn from our advertisers and refer to that and looked into brands that were investing in full funnel and then compared their results to those who were not. But before we go further, because we'll be referencing full funnel so many times, I want to take a pause and talk about it quickly. So as you all know, full funnel is a media execution that's supposed to reach all stages of your shopper journey. That would mean it's supposed to create brand awareness, it's supposed to create consideration for your brands, and of course, hopefully, finally, the purchase for your brands, which is the conversion part. As you see on the screen, Amazon Ads has multiple ad products that actually help you support the full funnel, and you can use any combinations of it. But what I want to emphasize is when we say full funnel, we only mean media execution or media activation that's across two of these three stages. We don't mean it has to be active across all three, and that's an important differentiator. You'd see that when we refer to some of the full funnel slides, that would come out as well. All right. So let's start with looking at the actual data that we found. We start with 2022, and what we found was the advertisers who invested in upper and middle funnel during this time saw 19% higher sales growth compared to the advertisers who did not. Now, 19% is important because this is sales growth. That translates to actual dollars for an SMB business or for any business, for that matter. So this was an important data that we saw, and that started a thought process of, if we are seeing this, is that happening because, as those who are investing in full funnel are just reaching out to the same audience multiple times, and maybe then those shoppers are buying more. So we did more analysis, and what we found is interesting, and that's what you see in this next slide. All right. So what we saw was, for example, in this case, a home and kitchen brand, they grew despite those headwinds at the time, and they saw 30% higher sales growth, and what's more important here is 35% higher shopper growth. So what this can be translated into is, not only you're getting more sales, but you're getting it through new shoppers for your brand. And that's more important because that's setting you on the path for long-term success. All right, so now, as we looked further, of course, we asked more questions from ourselves. So we thought, okay, 2021-22, those who invested in full funnel see these results. What happens afterwards? Do they continue to see more similar results in the future? So we looked into 2023 and again looked at advertisers who were investing in full funnel. Those are small and medium businesses, of course. And one thing you'll notice is we're calling out that brands who've used 4 or more ad products as the highlight here. That's just because when you activate 2 or more stages of the funnel, you end up having 4 ad products activated at the time. So what we started seeing again in 23 was there is a brand growth that we see, and that's again 20%, which of course is a double-digit growth, and it's important to note. We also continue to see add to cart rate growth, which is basically consideration for the brands. And finally, and very importantly, we see 14% higher new to brand growth still. So we saw that the sales grew for 21-22 period. We saw that continued this amplification of your results throughout the funnel stages continued to happen in 2023 as well. All right, of course, we continue to ask more questions. And while we established that full funnel compounds over time, we were thinking about what happens in 2024 again, because we have seen these economic cycles and ebbs and flows that Tim talked about over these last 3 years. So we just looked at this slightly more nuanced this time. So we started with what we call as the standard 14-day attribution period. When we measure Amazon any ad performance in Amazon Ads, what we usually go with is that the ad sustains impact for 14 days, and after that, we consider there is no impact left. So we started with that, and as you see here, advertisers who used full funnel advertising or full funnel investments actually see 110% higher detailed page view rates than those who did not. Then we also see the similar results in new to brand rates, 78% higher new to brand rates. And lastly, but most importantly, we see a growth of 146% purchase rates for those advertisers. Now, this is again trying to establish that we see full funnel impact for the short term, at least for a 14-day period, still in 2024 across the advertisers that we have been looking at. But then we thought, we're talking about full funnel investments. That means we should expect the impact to sustain for a little longer. So why don't we look at what happens when we start looking at a 30-day attribution window? So you'd see the results actually are even better. You see the detail page view rates are at 110%. What that means is the brand still saw sustained brand awareness growth. That means more customers were going to know about the brand. The new to brand rates actually increased to 109%. That means more new shoppers were buying from the brand. And most importantly, the purchase rate again grew up by 1.5x almost, so at 193%. That this actually establishes to us at least that we've been seeing the similar results, and long-term results of a full funnel investments have actually helped small and medium businesses quite a lot across the funnel stages, not just in parts of the funnel. All right, while these data points are great, it's important to understand what do we do and how do we execute these strategies that we've been suggesting. So over to you, Tim and Dory, to talk about these slides.
Yeah, threw a ton of data at you. We're going to talk about really how we recommend executing, building the right strategy. There are a couple very widely prevalent things to consider, though, that we're hearing a lot from our customers on. First off, the path to purchase isn't linear. We could have had this slide up here probably a few years ago, and that would have been true as well, but we are in a state of evolution right now. If you think on average, this number has increased over time. There's 20 touch points that precede a purchase decision. And if you think about it, yes, we've been researching on our phones for quite some time, researching the web, reading customer reviews, asking friends, really asking AI friends now. This truly is evolving, maybe listening to influencers as well. We've heard a lot about that recently. And this presents a challenge. Can you reach customers across every touch point? How do you reach customers across every touch point? And will that just result in a massive amount of overspend? So this is something that we're hearing. We know that it's important for marketers to show up here, but it has to be done in an efficient manner. When marketers are able to show up throughout that path to purchase, there's a real struggle with understanding what's actually driving what. And there's some super crafty tactics, I think, that are taking place across the audience really that's here at Accelerate today around measuring cross-platform impact. Amazon has some solutions there. Partner agencies are really doing well in this environment as well, but 62% of advertisers struggle, and I would argue even with Amazon, probably a higher percentage more recently have struggled to understand what is the actual impact if I'm running sponsored products or if I'm running display advertising via DSP. How does that work together? And it's something that we're really obsessed about trying to solve. As we walk through some best practices, we're going to throw up the marketing funnel again. You've heard it several times here. I'm sure you've heard it a lot, both during the conference as well as prior to this. Really what this does is just simplify a view of what is truly a nonlinear path to purchase, positioning where Amazon's services or benefits as touch points across partners. We're going to go into some details, highlight some specific products, accessibility for SMBs and sellers that are new, as well as some measurement solutions that we prescribe that address one of those pain points that we just talked about. Before we do that, I know that it's not the first time you all have heard about full funnel advertising. And I think Global Overview has been very successful with this. And so Dory, as you reintroduce full funnel advertising to the customers that you work with, how does that conversation go and where do you start?
Yeah, well, full funnel advertising isn't just for big brands. Small and mid-sized businesses can really see outsized impact with the right strategy. So at Go, we usually start our advertisers out with lower funnel sponsored ads. So they're going to gain that immediate ROI, and we're going to start that product discovery and consideration journey. We're going to start to see the flywheel moving, and when that happens and we're seeing the impact to top line, that's when we're going to look to layer in upper funnel tactics like display ads, video ads that are really going to start to build that awareness and scale our consideration to drive growth. But the key really is in sequencing and measurement. We don't recommend rolling out every ad product at once. Instead, we design a rollout strategy that's tied to each brand's business goals and key success metrics. And what we see from that is efficiency. So in fact, year-to-date 2025, Global Overview brands who included upper funnel consistently in a full funnel media mix drove an overall ad attributed ROAS that was 30% higher than our brands that focus primarily on lower funnel. So with the right strategy and measurement, full funnel can be a major opportunity for SMBs.
Yep, the crawl, walk, sort of maybe run slowly to start with. We need to start from a point of earning trust, driving performance, and scaling from there. We're going to go through just a handful of callouts. We're not going to go through full product portfolio across the funnel right now. But I do want to start at the top because we've got some updates here as well. And at the top, when it comes to driving awareness, and I think also driving consideration, that's where streaming TV comes into play. Right now, based on some cool announcements that many of you have probably seen in the trades, Amazon Ads reaches 200 million US customers every single month on streaming TV. It is available directly in the ad console alongside sponsored products and sponsored brands, which we feel really lowers the barrier to entry for big screen living room advertising. It's also available via Amazon DSP. We know that, and we really look to partners to help get the most of that. And on streaming TV, the audience is large, but what that really does, it affords the ability to get incredibly precise with the audiences that you reach. And that's, I think, also where AMC comes to play. Now we're getting down to display advertising. We're going to go a little bit deeper here. So display advertising, obviously been around for quite some time. Yes, available directly in the ad console alongside search ads, available via Amazon DSP. Couple updates for Amazon DSP specifically for this audience. Usability, I think of Amazon DSP as the Ferrari for high impact advertising. There's a lot of buttons, a lot of settings, and we've improved campaign setup time, which is an area of feedback that we've gotten by 67%. And then importantly, and the keynote was in some way related to this earlier today around creative build time is down by 70% in Amazon DSP, again, lowering this barrier to entry. Well, when you get into the specifics of the types of audiences to activate on DSP, I've said this before, it's really in how detailed you can get, and I think that our partner agencies are just doing an incredible job here using AMC to do that. And so, Dory, would love to hear some best practices and share with the group here on how to get the most out of Amazon DSP.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Tim. So to drive incremental growth, we have to create demand and bring new shoppers into the funnel. And Amazon DSP really gives us that ability. It lets us curate scaled audiences that are actually researching and browsing, but they haven't yet purchased. So as Tim was talking about, along with Amazon's DSP audiences that include in-market, contextual, behavioral, lifestyle, today we can take that a step further, and that's through AMC audiences. So AMC audiences allow us to leverage each brand's unique anonymized browsing and shopping signals and build our own audiences. So just a couple examples of these audiences include an add to cart audience. So we can reach shoppers who have actually have our product in their cart, but they've yet to push that order button. And we can also build an audience for exposed to DSP shoppers. So these are folks who have seen our banner ads, they've seen our videos, but they have yet to purchase. So then with engaging video and display advertising, we can re-engage these groups, work to close that loop and bring them back to Amazon for purchase. And I think something to remember too, as we've discussed, when we combine DSP with sponsored ads in a full funnel approach, the two are going to also continue to work together to drive greater advertising effectiveness and efficiency.
Yep, and to that point, in research, this is Amazon internal data study, and we've got another slide that kind of zooms out on overall full funnel impact. One of the pain points that we talked about is trying to understand what the cross-platform, what's the holistic benefit of running across all these different platforms and showing up different touch points. And what we find, and this is a benchmark essentially, that when you're adding ad products, using additional ad products in conjunction with sponsored ads, conversion increases by 16%. Right? And conversion rates are fantastic. I do have a question mark about, okay, at what cost, which is where precision and efficiency comes into play through some of the best practices that Dory outlined. But if we then take one step back and look at overall full funnel impact. This is a study that we did in 2024, looking specifically at this. We've talked about a couple different studies that we've done here. One looking back at economic cycles in 2022. This is more recent data on full funnel ad strategies. And what we found is that full funnel investments drive pretty stellar results, and they actually get better the further down the funnel that you go. So brands that employ full funnel strategies, we see a 17% increase in brand awareness, 26% increase in brand and product consideration, and finally a 48% increase in conversion, which is remarkable. If we move on a little bit, those are awesome benchmarks. They're not necessarily easy to accomplish because we talked about some pretty nitty-gritty tactics today. And it's important to address the measurement element throughout that funnel. And so, Dory, I'll hand it off to you. I think you've got some good best practices there on metrics to pay attention to throughout the funnel.
Absolutely. So when we talk measurement, it's critical to align the KPIs to the outcome each phase of the funnel is designed to drive. So let's start at the top at the awareness stage. Our goal here is to expand our reach, to bring more shoppers into our brand. So the metrics we're going to be looking at here include unique reach and branded search lift. So are we driving discoverability, and is it sparking real interest with our audiences? So next, as we move down the funnel, let's look at consideration. So that's when we're talking to shoppers in the category who are actively shopping and browsing their different product and brand options. So the goal here is traffic. How much traffic can we drive to product detail pages, and how efficiently? So the metrics we're gonna key in on here are detail page views, detail page view rates, and cost per detail page view. And then finally, what does success for full funnel advertising look like? So the aim of full funnel is to consistently bring in new traffic to our brands and do it in a way that's more efficient and effective than with lower funnel advertising alone. And so what we're gonna look at here for our success metrics are new to brand purchases, and we're also gonna be watching our impact to top line sales. So I did wanna add, AMC has really become a game changer from a measurement standpoint. Instead of just seeing those last touch attribution metrics, AMC allows us to connect the signals across the advertising so we can see the impact that our upper funnel advertising is having on things like purchase rate and new to brand sales. So, as we're tracking our KPIs to the funnel, it's important for us to understand that we're building a holistic picture here of how advertising is driving brand growth.
Yep, thanks, Dory. We are coming down to some key takeaways here, and then just an easy ask for the audience. Three main takeaways. Number one, we looked at a ton of data on the history of how brands adapt, or those that don't adapt, to economic cycles, and some best practices there. And history proves that there is growth potential and even near-term ROI as well. Number two, full funnel strategies, if executed in the right way, can not only drive long-term brand growth, which I think there's some level of conviction in from across the customers that we work with, but can actually result in near-term efficiency based on some of the best practices that we talked about. And then finally, Amazon, through a lot of what we talked through today, products, measurement, AMC, and being tied at the hip with our agency partners, can help build the right strategy for your brands